Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Good morning. My name is Andrea and you are listening to Pull Up a Chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I know you're so used to me saying, oh, it's a beautiful morning outside my window here in Holy Jerusalem, but guess what? It is midnight where I am visiting family on the east coast of the United States. I am actually in Silver Spring, Maryland, which reminds me, the chat room is open. If you want to tell me that you have family, mishpacha, here in Silver Spring, or you miss hearing me from Jerusalem, let me know. Let me also say Boker Tov to Eretz Yisrael, where it's 7 o'clock in the morning. Hi, in the U.S., it is late. Canada's listening in. The U.K. is listening in today. France is with us. Germany. Hello, Nigeria. And, of course, India. So it's going to be a beautiful day. As you know, because you listen to the station, we are in the interim days of the Passover holiday, Pesach. And these days are called Chol HaMoed. And I must tell you, it's sort of like a quasi-hug, a quasi-holiday, where some of us are working, but, we're dressed a little nicer. We're visiting each other. We're having family. And I promise you one thing. Today's show is so casual that it could be interrupted by my sister-in-law coming down looking for the salt and the pepper, or my mother, who's 91, and she's the purpose of this trip, coming out and asking me where I left her bedroom slippers, because here on Israel News Talk Radio, we want to keep it real. All right, so when we come back after the break, I'm going to talk about a little bit what the experience was traveling during these days of Corona, being on an airplane for the first time in over a year, what was weird, what was wonderful, and what it feels like looking at tomorrow, and of course, what it feels like coming back to the land of my birth, but no longer feeling American. Very weird, very kooky, and guess what? We'll speak more about it on the other side.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Okay, this is Andrea Sementov. Pull up a chair on Israel News Talk Radio.com. So if I'm speaking a little slow tonight, I'm sure that some of you will write to me, say, hey, Andrea, why were you speaking so low the other night? So first of all, I've got babies sleeping in the house. I mean, like infants, like cute little babies. Then we have a very, very elderly woman. This is a home. It's really what Pesach is all about. It's about the generations, the retelling the story, one generation into the other. And I thank God, I'm actually experiencing that this week. But there's another reason that I'm talking low. Let's cut out the lofty stuff. I am feeling I think I caught something. Yes, I've been all vaccinated. Yes, I had my flu shot. Yes, I did all that stuff. I have such a cold. I don't know. It's not a cold. It's like, I just don't feel great. But I'm very happy to be with you. All right. So what I was sharing with you is very interesting. We had on my show a couple of weeks ago, we had my travel agent, Mark Feldman, who was saying to me, ha ha, Andrea, I'll get you to America, but I'm not so sure I'll get you back. Just today, I was going over what it's going to take me to get back. I have to take more tests, but I don't really know this area. I have to drive to a pharmacy here that I don't know and it's very, very scary. And I had a terrible experience in the airport leaving. It was surreal in the Israeli airport. I had waited too late to get the COVID test, the test you need to get on the plane. Not because I didn't have documentation that I was vaccinated, or you also, if you weren't vaccinated, you needed information that you had been, you recovered from COVID. But in my particular case, I got to the airport very, very late, and I said, big deal. I only need 4 hours to do the rapid COVID test and I'll get on the plane. Well, guess what, boys and girls? It's 4 hours until the gate closes. If you don't get the results before you check in, you can't get on the plane. And it was America that needed that test. If I tell you, I got the test and I sat there crying, knowing that the check-in was going to close in 3 hours. And I said, I'm not going to see my family. I don't know how I'm going to leave this airport. And suddenly, bing, I prayed, I got a bing, and my test results came back in. Very weird experience to be on an airplane that you knew everyone was COVID-free. You knew it was like the safest between there and then, let's see, I went from Newark. I don't know. I needed all of these tests. It was wild to have at least that little respite of being frightened that you were going to get something. I wanted to tell you that I'm missing Israel terribly, just terribly. With every time I come to the States, I'm just a little more distant, a little further away from the land and even, I don't know, the attitudes that I grew up with. Here, I have to tell you, one of my observations is that Israelis are messier than Americans. And I'm not talking about our homes. I'm talking about attitudes. There's something that I'm observing here in America, and I ask any of you to correct me if I'm wrong at Andrea at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. But there seems to be more of a reserved quality in a lot of the people with whom I'm crossing paths here. And it reminds me of who I used to be, but no longer am. I remember living in America, and there were many more rules. There were rules of behavior. These aren't necessarily bad things. I think Israelis have all the rules of behavior. They just don't follow any of them. But for some reason, today, as an Israeli, I find myself laughing louder than I did 26 years ago. I cry for realer reasons. I wage political battles with friends that just somehow feel more meaningful. I have to tell you what it really means to be an Israeli by choice. On my worst day, I feel God's presence on my skin. I feel it in my home. I feel it in every breath I take. My friends, I have to tell you, I am having a glorious time here visiting with family. I mean, I'm sleeping really well in plush beds with sheets and blankets that I have trouble describing. I'm eating a little too well, thank you. Everything is just so ordered, and I'm lapping up beautiful generosity that seems to be limitless. There's no buts. The only eggshells I'm going to walk upon in this post-Seder show, and before we get to the end of our Passover Chag, is, and I know you're not surprised to hear this, but once again, I, Andrea Simintov, am beseeching my brothers and sisters in Galut, in the diaspora, to keep Israel front and center in their happily ever after plans. I've actually met people here who are Torah observant. They pray. Anybody can eat in their house. Their level of Kashrut, keeping kosher, is superior. They are very careful of people's feelings. And yet, when you ask them if they have any plans with regard to Israel, they may say, well, if my children moved there, I would be sad, but I would understand. Understand from my perspective, and I'm trying to understand and walk in another man's moccasins, but from my perspective, there's something that's very twisted and very wrong in this. Keep Israel in your crosshairs, even if it doesn't seem to make sense. You know, I've said this before, and I'll say it another 30 times. It was given to us not for teen touring only, for bar mitzvah family getaways only, and after 120 years, burials. Galut is just that. It's a lingering reminder of when we were hurled out of our eternal homeland, yearning forever to merit our return. Indeed, to live outside of Israel was designed to keep us just a little humbler, a little sadder, a little more embarrassed, and a little more determined to walk clearly in God's eyes. Israel? Oh, it is hard. But hard has never been an excuse not to do something. It just is. I'm begging you, put it in your mental Tupperwares. Plan on coming home. Perhaps just so in order that at the end of next year's Seder, when you dance around that table and you sing Hashana Haba B'Yerushalayim next year in Yerushalayim, we'll look into the eyes of those we love and those who count on us and know that the words which come out of our mouths match the action and the faith that is in and of itself a blessed reward. Okay, that is my big entry speech. Let's see. Fun piece, fun fact this week before I get into my next lofty talk during the next segment. Just came across this. Apparently, a Muslim bus driver, on the Egged bus line right near my house, he lives near my neighborhood, and his name is Ihab, and he is from Jerusalem, and he decorated his bus with flowers and foil. He made his house like a kosher LePesach, a kosher for Passover home, so that all the passengers could be happy. And his quote was, so that we'll feel love for at least one day in the hope it'll stay forever. I just thought this was adorable. I saw a picture. He had flowers in the bus, and he had tables, and then he even, I couldn't believe this, he actually covered some of the seats with aluminum foil. Very, very cute. So he drives the 77 line in Jerusalem. Anybody know about the 77 line? And he explained, I got this note actually on Ynet. He said, let's just say, in the middle of the bus, this was too much. One of the passengers actually found the afikomen, the piece of matzah that you hide so that you get a prize. And what did he do? For the prize of having found the afikomen, he received a coupon for dinner for two. And what was Ehab's loving note? I thought about what to do. I bought flowers, I bought balloons, I decorated the bus, and it was beautiful. People were happy, I was moved, and the passengers were touched. And this is not the first time that Ehab, I hope I'm saying his name right, has delighted his Jewish passengers. I also decorated the bus on Purim. I just thought that was adorable. I like that story. It made me feel upbeat. I told you, if you want to get into arguments with me and say, well, what are you doing this on Israel News Talk Radio? Talk to someone else. The other shows are much more political. They have a lot more information than I do. I basically just have a lot of love for people these days. I just want you to know that before I got on the air, the engineer of this show made a snide remark about my being sick again. Because once I said to him, I take a little cinnamon in my coffee every day and I never get sick. My friends, I will live to regret sharing that intimacy with this show's engineer. And I have to tell you, I'm going to put in a complaint and try to have this guy fired. It's a joke. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about the upcoming Israel's Independence Day coming up. We're going to talk about Yom HaZikaron, the Memorial Day for fallen soldiers, and much more. This is Andrea Simintov. Guess what? I'll see you on the other side.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, pull up a chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Just had a really funny thought. First of all, William in the chat room. I know that at least he's my partner today. William and I are up very late here on the East Coast of the United States. But, you know, he seemed to like, I think, the quote where I said Israelis are messier than Americans. And I'm not talking about Israelis are insane with the neatness, with the cleanness, with the sponge on the floors, the wiping, the cleaning all the time. But there's something, I'm using the word messy actually as a loving adjective for the largeness and the sloppiness and the porousness of the personalities. You know, I told you, so you could go on the bus and somebody will comment, they won't like the way your child is dressed. They'll tell you your child's not dressed warm enough. They'll tell you if you don't brush your hair, if you don't brush your hair a different way, your husband's going to leave you. They really leave it all said, really no controls, no breaks. And I used to make fun of it, I guess for the first 24 years of my Aliyah. But the last 2 years, I've come to embrace it, and I've come to actually be them. And I come to America, and I find that I have to rein in my personality because I found myself in a Trader Joe's. I had never been near Trader Joe's. I heard about it. And I'm looking for things, and everything there said Trader Joe's. And I got up. I don't know. I said to her, like, what is everything here, like from Trader Joe? And who is this guy? And she looked at me like no one ever asked them. I don't know. I found it very interesting, very sweet. So I like personalities that are big, large, loving, embracing, and life is too short to just watch everything. Be kind, but messy can be good. Okay, hope that answers your... I'm so happy you're with me, William. Okay, everybody, by the way, if anything I speak about tonight piques your interest, isn't clear, you'd like to know the source of my material, bisimcha, happily, write to me, Andrea at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and I will get back to you. A couple of interesting points about the Seder or Pesach this year that, you know, the next time we meet, I'm actually going to be doing next week's show, God willing, I'm going to be doing it from New York. Hopefully I'm going to spend a few days visiting with people, but a little bit by myself on the ocean. Really looking forward to that. And who knows what will come out of this gray matter by that time. But it'll be afterwards, and then we'll be sort of gearing up for the Israeli season of celebrating who we are and what miracles have taken place in our marvelous country for more than 70 years. So I want to just wrap up a few Pesach thoughts I jotted down. And for those of you who missed the last show or aren't so clear, I want to say that, you know, traditionally, what is it? I have a friend, a non-Jewish friend, who found himself at 2 Seders this year, and I had to sort of, give him Pesach in a nutshell to kind of let him know what he'd be seeing, what it was all about. Is it just a dinner party with terrible bread? And so I explained to him that Pesach is the commemoration of the exodus from the Jewish people from Egypt. Now, this is the pivotal event. It's when we became a people. We gained our freedom. We all know that. It's a holiday of freedom, both physically and very soon after spiritually. And remember, there are 2 very different kinds of freedom. And we call this holiday, since we're working on a Hebrew, we call this Zman Chirusenu, the time of our freedom. And the Seder itself, it's filled with obligations, it's filled with practice. That message of freedom is just drilled home, that message of redemption. Believe me, don't get lost in the matzah balls. That's what it's about. So it's not like any other Jewish holiday. The Pesach home smells different than a Rosh Hashanah home, than a Shavuos home, than even a Sukkot home, indoors and outdoors. It has its own special practices. Some are very odd. Most of the holidays we observe have practices that are different from another, but Pesach is unique, is that we don't only start out to remember what happened using symbolism of the mitzvot or specific wording. The Haggadah is very, very specific. The blessings very rather, I'm slurring my words. I have so much to say. We retell the story in a way that's designed to make it as real as possible. Again, that's why I'm in a home with the elderly, with babies. We say as if we too are the ones who actually participated in this unprecedented event. The Rambam, in his wording in the Mishnah Torah, he stresses this point in every generation. One is obligated to see themselves as if they left right now from slavery in Egypt. It's not a film we turn on and turn off. It is our story. If gaining our freedom, though, is in some way a constant from year to year, and this year we gain it again, what exactly is the freedom that we get each year again? And what was that freedom that was achieved at the time the Jews left Egypt? In fact, it wasn't a complete freedom. I shared this thought at the Seder table with my nephews and nieces. We became free of Egyptian mastery, but you know what we did? We took on another yoke, the yoke of heaven and of God's mitzvot. God says clearly that the Jewish people are his servants and no one else is. Okay? We never gained our total freedom at the Exodus, but what we did gain was something called choice. We left the physical and spiritual incarceration in the land of Egypt, and consequently we gained something that was far truer, far more authentic, the one most valuable to all of humankind. Again, my friends, it was the freedom to choose. You know what? Is anybody really free of obligations? I don't think so, and more than that, I hope not. In the Sefer HaToda'ah, Eliyahu Kitov writes that who never tasted the slavery in Egypt cannot taste the taste of Geulah, of redemption. He says that if Bnei Yisrael hadn't been enslaved in Egypt, they would never have merited being free. Yeah, being free is the ultimate. But there's one step before that, boys and girls. It's a beautiful time of transition. That time where we leave the slavery, we become free, where we feel our muscles relax. When one leaves it, any kind of slavery, and gains their freedom, they gain an ability to make choices for themselves. The feeling of awareness rises. They become suddenly cognizant of their human capacity to choose every single step along the way. The individual who's always had the ability to choose, they're limited in how they exercise freedom. They lack that heightened sensitivity of the power that choice presents in all circumstances. The newly freed individual, one who says, oh my gosh, I can breathe. He relishes that choice. He knows that choice in some shape or form is always possible. Every Pesach, every year, every Nisan, we gain our freedom by regaining an awareness. What do we say? If this Seder is the same as last year's Seder, oy vavoy, we failed to get it. We're no freer from the challenges of choosing today than we were last year, or than we'll be next year, or than people were more than 3,000 years ago. At the time of the exodus from Egypt, and you know what? We're free to choose as people always have been. And we are as aware as people always will be. Again, we have a year in order to prepare how we'll be different, how we'll change. If the day after the Seder, if the day after Pesach, it's business as usual, indeed, we will have failed to get the message. Nisan reminds us that the power that we have, it empowers us to maneuver the entire world in which we live. It's a very exciting time. What's very interesting is Pesach, you would think that when we're done with it, we'll start tripping off and off to the summer, but no. We're immediately smack dabbed, we're humbled, and we begin to count the Omer, the days until the Shavuos holiday when we receive the Torah. Indeed, we may be free of slavery. We might even start to say, hey, I'm free to celebrate God, believe God, pray to God, have God believe in me. But I haven't yet merited what it is to live according to eternal laws and receive the holiest gift for time eternal. Oh my, I see, forgive me. I know that this is a complete non sequitur, but I think that Panama actually joined us today. Again, go into the chat room, let me know that you're listening in, and tell me, how was your Seder? Do you have customs? Do you have things that you do that are a little different than other people? Very curious to know. My name is Andrea Simintov. Oh, I'll see you on the other side.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I have to tell you, I just had a very adorable, like one of these 2-second conversations. Our Seder table this year just grew and grew. And my beloved niece got married. Let's see, I was in America, it must have been a year and a half ago. They have the most adorable baby. And I'm just talking to my new nephew-in-law. And I'm thinking, I think we may interview him next week. He does something really fascinating. I'm going to keep you guessing. We'll keep it a guessing game. What his line of work is, and what seems to be particularly un-Jewish. Okay, I think we'll talk about him last week. So, all right. So this week, all right, I mentioned that we are counting the Omer, the days. We had a conversation at the Yantif table. It was very interesting that we count the days until we reach Shavuos, the holiday where we receive the Torah. And what's very interesting is we go 50 days. And at the table, it was mentioned that, like, why 50 days? Why is it 50 days? And we didn't come up with an answer. That's the beauty of Judaism, where we all have a whole bunch of different thoughts about it. But one of the thoughts that was tossed out, I'd love to think it was my thought, because I like to think that I'm the most brilliant one there, but I don't think it was. But, when we left Egypt, we were, I believe, we had sunk to what we say was the 49th level of degradation, where we were sinking our way into such a spiritual abyss that the possibility was that if we went one more level, we would disappear. Jews would be like all the other civilizations that rose and fell. The story would have been written and the book closed. But we literally were snapped out of the land at the 49th hour and saved. So one of the thoughts at the table, which I just thought was marvelous, was that we count 50 days, because 50 days until we receive the Torah shows that one last step, that one little push in all of us could be the difference between achieving greatness and just falling by the wayside into, indeed, oblivion. So, came across with some other notes today. I hope the engineer will keep me very posted on time, because I have a lot of notes here. I'm looking at my papers. You want to hear my papers? You see that? All that preparation? I have like like a chest cold. All right. There's a very well-known truism in the human experience that, they have a saying that the best laid plans of mice and men, I don't really know where that comes from, but they're carefully drawn plans, and they're perfect. Plans are always perfect until life intervenes. The same can be said of other facets in, indeed, the Jewish world. As I've mentioned more than 11 times today, we are in the midst of what we say Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the days between Pesach and Shavuos. Now, in its original format, this was a time of joyful anticipation. On Shavuot, or Shavuos, the Jewish people, we knew we're going to receive that Torah at Har Sinai, and the anticipation of that world-changing event was one of great happiness. I have to interrupt in my notes just a moment and tell you, everyone says, well, how do you know this happened? How do you know this happened? Judaism, unlike many other faiths, and I can't speak for all the faiths in the world, I barely speak for Judaism, barely speak for my house, but a lot of times faith is based on a story that's passed down, but there were no witnesses. When we talk about the experience, the Jews leaving a land that was impenetrable, a land that one could never leave, a land whose borders and gates were actually built into its name, Mitzrayim, Tsar, a fence, a lock. They were taken out. Something incredible happened at Sinai, and it was documented in writings from around the world at that time that something incredible, something massive, something life-altering, earth-altering happened to the Hebrew people. So I had to segue that and tell you, our miracles never happened in secret. Our miracles in Judaism never happened to one individual from whom we have to believe the story, the tale. Our miracles always had witnesses. And, You don't, if a room full of Jews sees it, you know it happened because we're all going to be talking about it for millennia to come. All right. So again, it's in the nature of all human beings to look forward to significant events with happy thoughts, a feeling of excitement, expectation. And in addition, counting the days of the Omer, it's a mitzvah. It's a positive Torah commandment. Here I am in my brother's house, and I think tonight we had our fourth night. I'm standing up and stretching. I'm telling you, this show is so casual. I'm here in a bathrobe and bedroom slippers. Okay, how dedicated am I? But it's a positive Torah commandment, and we are very aware that we're instructed to fulfill the positive commandments of the Torah with happiness and enthusiasm, not with any kind of blasé feeling. So in this perfectly planned world, this period of time between Pesach and Shavuos should be one of crazed joy, satisfying times. But you know what? As we're all aware, the reality of this mood of this period is actually the opposite. It's a time when weddings do not take place. Beards and haircuts are not happening. Music, entertainment, they're very limited. And there's a general kind of a mood of somberness, if not actual sadness, pervading our society. In short, with the exception of that period that leads us up to Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, this period of Sfirat HaOmer is really the saddest time in the Jewish calendar. So we're talking about a paradox. History has intervened and altered our perception of these weeks. Again, in a perfect world, the Jewish people would never have suffered in the exile, and we wouldn't have had our traumas, and we wouldn't have experienced Holocausts. But you know what? We live in the real world. Terrible events have taken place during this period of time. What events? I'm going to race through them because I have more to share. Just watching the clock here, boys and girls. Rabbi Akiva, his entire society of 24,000 scholars, they died during this time. The rebellion of Bar Kokhba against Roman tyranny failed at this time. Pogroms and spears, worms, mains, the Rhineland destroyed. The Crusaders. Terrible times. It's interesting to note how Jewish values and halacha, that's Jewish law, they accommodate themselves to the historic relevance and events and intervention. What is the Torah? If not a book of human life and a story. It's not a menu. It is a blueprint, but don't be confused. It is not a history book. Whatever happens in the human story is relevant to understanding and appreciating the Torah. So again, just as life, I'm just looking at these notes here, So just as life intervenes with our plans, we say in Yiddish, un Mensch tracht, und Gott lacht. Man plans and God laughs. So too does the history of human events intervene in all of Jewish religious life by allowing the events of Jewish history to be commemorated, documented, celebrated within the framework of halakha, Jewish law. Even by changing the original nature and the mood of the mitzvahs, Judaism allows the Torah to be truly the book of humankind. I must say, just as I said at the beginning of the show, that I beg my Jewish brothers and sisters to understand that Judaism celebrated outside of the land of Israel, the imperfect, flawed land of Israel, the flawed land with frequently problematic residents. It's different to celebrate it outside. It's celebrating it with pails of sand on your feet. And we also know that there is a lack of knowledge of Jewish history today. It's a terrible failing in our world. But without knowing, because without knowing our whole story, we can't really put the events of this last century and a half into perspective. So let's commit to learning and let's go on. So again, Passover had three. Oh my gosh, they're racing. The time is racing. Okay. The intermediate days of Pesach, Chol HaMoed, that we're celebrating now, what is it? Let's celebrate. It represents our ability and the ability of the Torah to treat mundane activities and the world with holiness and special reverence. You know, some of us go to work, but we still know it's a holiday. The world understands that there can be holy days and that there are days that are not holy. So how in the world is it that we can have both at the same time? The drama of Jewish survival at the Sea of Reeds, the Yam Suf, it repeats itself in different forms over and over throughout the history of civilization. Passover reminds us of this truism. Merely knowing that this fact of history alone is sufficient to enable us to continue to build, to achieve, no matter what our enemies say or do.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.